Hello everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Dr. Paul will be away for a couple of more days. As I mentioned yesterday, he suffered a loss in his family, so he's taking care of family business. But I'll give you a brief report today, and today I want to talk about something that is something that we can feel, something that we can sense. Can't necessarily put our finger on it, but we sense it and feel it everywhere, which is a deep corruption in our society. And it's not only the kinds of corruption you see among corporations, with military-industrial complex. There's a deeper kind of moral corruption. You almost have a sense that the pillars of American society are made of sand and are crumbling in front of us. And Dr. Paul wrote last year, in a very important booklet, a mini book, he wrote about America's exceptional bankruptcy, and he talked about the financial system and how the financial system was rigged in favor of the elites, of course, rigged against the rest of us, and how essentially we are bankrupt financially. But he also, more importantly, I think, wrote about our moral bankruptcy, how we are bankrupt morally, and that an immoral society cannot be a healthy financial society, a healthy economic society. There's a deep kind of moral bankruptcy in the U.S., and you see it manifested in corruption. And of course, this deeper, broader definition of bankruptcy is not preferred by the very elites themselves. I was looking up some quotes from Dr. Paul's booklet last year, and the first thing that popped up when I typed in Ron Paul bankruptcy was an article from the Washington Post fact-checking him, saying Ron Paul has an inaccurate definition of bankruptcy. So there you have it. The institutions are hopelessly corrupt, and most importantly, I think they're no longer trying to hide it. We have the sense that things are happening before our very eyes that are astonishing. I picked out a few examples of these because I wanted to run them by you. And these aren't definitive examples that prove the thesis, the hypothesis, but these are observations across different sectors of society that I think tend to support this idea. And I'm going to talk about the media, I'm going to talk about the fact checkers, I'm going to talk about governments and the government's use of military, and I'm going to talk about the medical industrial complex. And so for the first point, let's talk about the media. And I have to thank Caitlin Johnstone for bringing this to my attention. I think we actually did talk about this earlier this year, but Edelman's annual trust barometer, they measure Americans' trust in the traditional media. And this is fascinating. Let's look at this first clip. It shows that for the first time ever, fewer than half of all Americans have any trust in the traditional media. And look at this, you go up to 2018, 2019, and then you see an absolute collapse from mid-20 on, or actually from early 2020 on, from late 19 on, collapse on the percentage of Americans who trust the traditional media down to 46%, unprecedented in history. Why is this? Let's look at some more numbers from Edelman. 56% of Americans agree with the statement that journalists and reporters are purposely trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or gross exaggerations. 58% think that most news organizations are more concerned with supporting an ideology or political position than with informing the public. These are very important numbers because, in a sense, it is a positive thing that Americans are no longer trusting the media because the media does lie. Johnstone, in a recent article in her Substack, writes that the trust in the media is never coming back. It's irredeemable because people now have their old way of understanding reality is now gone because of the media losing our trust. Routinely reporting stories that they know to be fake. The ongoing 4-year Russia collusion story, completely disproven and continued to this day reported. The idea that Russia had put bounties on the heads of Americans in Afghanistan, thoroughly refuted, still being reported, still even today being reported. And that's only the tip of the iceberg. If you look at big events like the January 6th events, we've talked about it on the show as well, thoroughly discredited aspects of it continue to be reported. So, and it's not because they're abandoning their role as journalists, Johnstone puts forth in her piece is because they're actually fulfilling it, because they answer to a different power, a higher power than you and I. They answer to their oligarchic owners. They answer to the elites who will never allow challenges to the narratives, and that's why you see such a crackdown in the tech world, in the social media world, because any challenges to the narrative, it's not a left or right issue. Any challenges to the narrative are to be forbidden. And we have a debt of gratitude to Project Veritas for exposing to us what we already knew. And sometimes that's the best thing. An expose of something that you say, I can't believe that's true, doesn't sometimes have the power, just don't put that on yet, please, doesn't have the power as it might have when it's something that he sort of suspected, and that doesn't surprise me, but it reinforces something that you see. In their recent expose of CNN, unfortunately to some degree sensationalized over some of the aspects like COVID and Trump. Yes, we push COVID. Yes, we try to get rid of Trump. But a deeper meaning in this, and let's put up this first one just as an example. These are some clips that I think Veritas itself put out. It's like fear really drives TV ratings. If it bleeds, it leads. This is their technical director, Charlie Chester, undercover. COVID, gangbusters with ratings, right? Which is why we constantly have the COVID death toll on the side. And let's go to the next one. This is even more damning, I think. Like you can shape an entire people's perception about anything on how you do it, right? And that's corruption. That's not reporting facts. That's not reporting the news. That is shaping perception openly. And they even, some of the other clips talk about how they will put facts aside and report what they think that their masters want to be reported. So yes, the media has lost, we have lost faith in the media completely. A lot of Americans still get their news, get their daily fear dose from the media. But the deep, deep, deep corruption of the media all around has led it to be viewed as completely irredeemable in the U.S. And here's another aspect of corruption. This is an important one because we've recently been deluged with the idea of fact checkers. And objectively, that sounds good. Oh, did you spell a word wrong? Or did you report that JFK was shot in 1968 or something? Yes, fact checkers sound good. But the fact of the matter is that fact checkers need to be fact checked themselves, because you need to look behind who's paying the fact checkers. Are they actually giving us objective views, or are they also irredeemably corrupt? And we have to thank our good friend Thomas Massey for a tweet and Facebook post he put up yesterday exposing, not yet please, exposing yet just a little bit of the corruption among the entire fact checking. You can go and you can look into who are these fact checkers, who are being hired, what is their backgrounds, what is their, the Atlantic Council is checking facts for Facebook, telling them whether this is Russian disinformation, for example, and there's plenty of examples of this. But here's what Thomas Massey put up yesterday. Let's put this first tweet up. Very, very good job from Massey. Former director of the CDC is now the CEO of the foundation that funds factcheck.org's vaccine fact-checking program. Roughly 15% of that foundation's assets are Johnson & Johnson stock. Now, maybe that's just a coincidence. But interestingly enough, would you trust factcheck.org to objectively fact-check anything that you may post about vaccination? I'm not talking about crazy conspiracy theories. I'm talking about anything mildly critical and even factual. And I've seen for myself, and I'm sure many of you have as well, you've seen absolutely factual things, even things quoting the CDC itself being fact-checked by the fact checkers and shown to be wrong because it can be perceived as being mildly critical of the vaccines or any other aspect of the disease. And let's look at the next one. Now, this is the evidence that Massey put up. Factcheck.org said, we received $53,501 from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. The vaccination project is made possible by a grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Well, let's look at the next one. Here is that foundation. I think you skipped one. I'll go to the next one. Yeah, here it is. Richard Bresser, President and CEO of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, a position he assumed in 2017. He is a former acting director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Again, not intrinsically evidence of corruption. However, certainly evidence of a conflict of interest. And let's go back one to this fact sheet, and this is what Representative Massey also put up. This is their statement of financial position for the foundation, and you see they have $1.67 million in Johnson & Johnson stock. So, not to say that they are necessarily corrupt, but certainly a conflict of interest when it comes to checking you for something you might say about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, or any vaccine for that matter. And the next one I want to cover is has to do with the military, and this is a piece that I noticed in the LA Times, a mainstream publication. You talk about preparations for Americans getting a little too uppity, getting a little bit too upset about being locked down, getting a little bit too upset maybe about police brutality, a little bit too upset about what may be happening at the inauguration. Let's put this next one up. This is a fascinating article. California Guard members feared fighter jet would be ordered to frighten protesters. And this is a piece that came out a couple of days ago. Last March, the CIA, or the California National Guard, received orders to prepare for civil unrest over the government response to the coronavirus. Not necessarily something completely out of the blue. They didn't know what to expect, and they are deployed sometimes in times of civil unrest, real or imagined. But what the LA Times reported is that the air branch of the California National Guard was reportedly told to place 2 F-15C fighter jets on alert status for a possible domestic mission. That means they're fueled and ready to go. Possible domestic mission. It's not specific what, let's put that picture back up again actually, because it's not specific what the mission might have been, but it is understood that those planes could be used to disperse protesters by terrifying them using their jet engines. They were also reportedly, this may not be correct, reportedly put on alert and ready to fly for any unrest after the George Floyd protests, and, as I said, for any unrest following the U.S. election. The use of fighter jets against civilians protesting would be unprecedented in the U.S. And, of course, the governor's responsible for the National Guard, and he said he'd never approve such a thing. The LA Times article goes on to talk about the fact that there really wouldn't be any other mission for the F-15s domestically. They're not too good at, looking over earthquake areas or anything of that sort. They're basically there for shooting down airplanes. So, again, another example of this sort of unrest, this sort of sense that the elites are unprepared and unhappy and perhaps a bit nervous about this, about the system falling down. And here's another example of corruption. Let's look at this next one. Dr. Paul talks about if you subsidize something, you will get more of it. And it's a great important point, and how it goes along with the financial system, it goes along with social issues, it goes across the board. Let's put this next clip up, because here's the perfect example of it. COVID, this is from CNET, Personal Finance, this is just from this past week. COVID funeral reimbursements are now $9,000. Here's how you apply today. And if your relative passed away from COVID-19, you can, funerals are expensive. And if they pass away, if that's on the death certificate, you will qualify for $9,000. Not necessarily an example of corruption, but can you imagine the incredible incentive out there to do such a thing? And here's from the article. Who can apply to get reimbursed for COVID-19 related funeral expenses? According to FEMA, the death must have occurred in the U.S., including territories in D.C. Funeral costs were incurred after January 2020. The death certificate must indicate the death was attributable to COVID-19, attributed to COVID-19. It doesn't say from, it could be with. Applicant must be a U.S. citizen, etc. There is no income requirement. Is that related somehow to the high COVID counts? It could be. It could relate to it. If you have so much money available, if you subsidize, you will get more of it. And there's another example of it. And I'm going to do my final example, and this is a broader example. This is the corruption of public health. Let's look at the next one, because we sort of laughed at this when we saw this. Joe Biden was sending a message to the world by wearing a mask in a video summit. It was him and his camera. He has been vaccinated, so presumably is not spreading COVID around everywhere. Nevertheless, just him and his camera. He's the only world leader pictured that had a mask on as he sat here in a video conference. This is a corruption of power. He's saying he was using that as an example for the rest of Americans, for America and the rest of the world to understand how important it was to wear a mask. Of course, ironically, this is the week where the CDC is about to announce that, well, you know, this whole wearing a mask outdoors thing, it's not really that necessary because it doesn't spread that way after a year of forcing people to be wearing masks, even in our national parks, even hiking by yourself in the desert. And in fact, we have an article up at the Ron Paul Institute, ronpaulinstitute.org, an excerpt from a piece in the Federalist about, ironically, because we talked about this a little bit yesterday, all of the measures now that the media-hungry people in public health, like Fauci, are talking about. This mask thing is being overdone, et cetera, et cetera. All of the things that Scott Atlas was saying 6, 7, 8 months ago, which got him into trouble. Remember, the then CDC director, Redfield, said, everything he says is a lie. Well, it turns out, and if you look at this article, you'll see, it turns out everything that he said then is now being adopted by the CDC itself now, quietly. So there you have more corruption in the medical industrial complex, the public health complex. So corruption is with us. It's blinding. It's coming fast. The media, the military industrial complex, the media industrial complex, the medical industrial complex. It's dizzying. It's right out in front of us. It doesn't make efforts to hide any longer. We feel like we're being gaslit, probably because we are. We are being gaslit by the elites. It's not a left and right issue, and that's very important to understand. It's them versus us in many ways. So what can we do? Well, we can pay attention. Unfortunately, at the risk of adopting cynicism, our immediate response should be that this is not true. What they're telling us is not true. We can't simply take for granted the way that we have understood the world around us up until perhaps this last year, or even if you want to count Russiagate, this past 4 years. We can't presume that things around us are as they seem. And it can be a little bit threatening, epistemologically threatening to us. What is reality? What is knowledge? But the fact is, it's the only way we can cope with this constant gaslighting. So I'm just throwing this out there to consider some of these aspects of corruption, to think about this deep corruption in our society, and to think about it in the context of Dr. Paul's writing about moral bankruptcy. Once you are morally bankrupt as a society, you're susceptible to anything. You're susceptible to the corruption. So let's think about ourselves. Let's think about our society. Let's think about where we're going. Let's think about the game the elites are playing with us. Let's think about the Great Reset. Let's think about the new normal. Let's think about the kind of society that we want to live in. And if Dr. Paul were here, he would say the answer to this, of course, is to embrace the core key kernel of our defense against this, which is to embrace the idea of personal liberty, of doing what you want to do as long as you don't hurt someone, and of taking that on board, of not hurting people, of actively trying to not hurt people. In fact, the opposite may be true of helping people. So that is something we can take with us. Again, I would remind everyone to please subscribe to this channel because people are telling us that they're being unsubscribed after they subscribe. Please subscribe to this channel. Please subscribe to RPI Updates, ronpaulinstitute.org. Go to the button, subscribe, so that we can keep in touch. Because yes, there is corruption, there is censorship. People do not want to be exposed for what they're doing, and we want to be able to keep in touch with you. And as long as you can here, please continue to watch the Liberty Report. I promise you we will. We do have other alternative venues. We have other places you can watch the Liberty Report, even some of our episodes that have been pulled down. We will continue to develop those. We will continue to develop a plan B to continue to give you the news and analysis as we see it. hopefully just straightforward. So thanks for tuning in to the Liberty Report, and please come back and see us soon.